June. June. June 1864. The fourth year of the Bankyu era became the Ganji Ganen and summer sweetly blossomed. We can skip through this. So, what should I do? Join them on the rounds. No, I'm not, is the correct answer. Is this chapter over? Yes. I'm sorry you've arrived at the skip fest. I've done this game too many times. It's just, I have to skip. Our choices. We're good to go search for our father. Injured, and now we run into the place that is full of men fighting with katanas. And now, we look for Heisuke. I had to look for Heisuke. He was always looking after me, so it was time I returned the favor. I looked around the inn. What? Out of the darkness, a Ronin appeared, his sword at the ready, headed straight for me. As his sword swept down, another interposed itself between us, Nagakura's blade. Thank you, Shinpachi. The Ronin gurgled wetly as Nagakura drove his sword deep into the man's stomach. Blood exploded everywhere. Ew. I felt my throat suddenly rise. So much blood.
こんなとこに呼んじまってすまねえな。奥に平助がいる。行ってやってくれるか。この先には誰も行かせねえから、平助の面倒見てやってくれ。頼んだぜ。
With that, he turned around and brought his blade up to meet another Ronin's. Got it! I'm going to go to Heisuke just as Nagakura asked. I turned and ran off through the battlefield that the Ikeda Inn had become. As soon as I got to the top of the second floor, I found him. Heisuke? You're hurt! I blinked and looked around. He blinked and looked around, almost as if he couldn't see me. Perhaps it was all the blood running from the wound on his forehead. Yeah, that would be it.
Baka! お前なんで来たんだよ!
What? What do you mean? I'm here because I was worried about you. I thought maybe I could help.
Baka! 危ないだろ! 俺の心配とかしてる場合じゃないし!
Maybe, but that's a serious injury.
別に大したことないし、こんなの唾でもつけときゃ治るっつの。
As he spoke, he turned around, his sword held in a ready position, prepared to defend me. But he was so weak, I could see that he only kept his grip on... brain. But he was so weak, I could see that he could only keep his grip on it with great effort. That's because there's a word fucking wrong in this sentence, isn't it? The Ronin across from us, on the other hand, was as silent and calm as a great statue. Wait. Things didn't seem right. Suddenly, I realized what it was. The Ronin had no sword. I didn't have the time to try and figure out what that meant, though. I had to help Heisuke. We had to do something about the Ronin. With grim determination, I laid my hand on the hilt of my sword. He saw me move, and Heisuke's eyes went wide. I'll fight too, then. I might not be able to help much, but I can watch your back. He looked stunned for a second, but then his mouth split into a grin.
無理無理 お前には5年くらい早いって。
5 years? Are you sure 5 years? Wait, 5 years. Hold on a second. It wasn't really the answer I'd expect to hear, and I couldn't help but laugh at it. So she laughed as I laughed? Alright. The Ronin looked at us and sighed.
私には戦う理由がありません。
What? What did he mean?
君たちが引くというのなら、むやみに命を奪うつもりはありません。
He was letting us go? Considering the situation we were in, that was quite a favor. But how could we believe his word?
俺らには理由があるんだっての。長州の奴らを見逃すわけには。
Heisuke wobbled. Oh dear. Heisuke? He could barely stand.
決めつけは歓迎できません。私は長州に組みするものではありませんから。なら、どうして池田やなんかに。
His words were forced, as if it took all of his effort to speak, and the tip of his sword was beginning to shake. He showed no fear, but his injuries were serious. He couldn't put any more power into his arms to the point of not being able to hold his sword.
命に関わる怪我ではないはず。早く手当てをするといい。
The Ronin took one last unreadable look at us and then turned around to leave. Heisuke! He began to run after the Ronin, but he slipped in the fresh pool of blood and crashed into the floor. Oh, okay. He made a few more grunts that sounded like attempts at further curses, then stumbled and collapsed unconscious. I need to stop the bleeding! Quickly, I tore off a section of my sleeve and pressed it against his forehead. Just as the man stated, it looked as though the blow only tore the skin, although it penetrated through to his skull. Whoa, okay. At last, I felt myself relax. We were still in danger, but Heisuke's wound didn't look fatal. That was when I saw the head guard lying on the floor. Huh? It must have been Heisuke's, but it had been cracked cleanly in half by something. Their fight must have been awfully intense. I was starting to feel dizzy from the stench of blood, but Heisuke needed me. I couldn't give up. Yeah, that headguard being cleaned straight in half. Finally, the sun rose from the black sky. The raid itself had only lasted 2 hours. But for me, at least, it had felt far longer. There had been 20 Imperial Nationalists at the Ikeda Inn. The Shinsengumi had killed 7 Ronin and injured 4 more. I learned later that, with the help of the Aizu Domain and the Kyo Judiciary Commissioner, they arrested 23 people. The owner of the Ikeda Inn had also been arrested for trying to help the Choshu rebels escape. The Shinsengumi had won an incredible victory, fighting against superior numbers in enemy territory, but they paid dearly for it. Okita had taken a blow to the chest and lost consciousness. Heisuke had been cut on the forehead, and the bleeding refused to stop. Nagakura had injured his left hand, although he was left standing. One of the Shinsengumi soldiers lost his life in the inn's rear entrance, and 2 others were severely injured there as well. It didn't seem likely that they would survive. The Kyo Military and Judiciary Commissioners also fought the Choshu Ronin. With the successful resolution of the Battle of Ikeda Inn, the Shinsengumi had, at last, made a name for themselves. It looked as though the peace in Kyo had been protected. Never could I have imagined what the ultimate result of their victory would be. water. We choose to stay behind. Alright, let's do this one and the next one. A few days passed. Your medicine's ready. I was carrying medicine and some hot sake. The medicine was Ikeda medicinal powder, which was manufactured by Hijikata-san's family.
宗司と平助に飲ませてやってくれ。それから三男さんにもだ。
Sanan-san's eyebrows rose with the mention of his name.
おや、私も飲むんですか？私の傷はもう塞がっていますよ。
試してみましょうよ、三男さん。この薬って何にでも効くらしいですから。
Sanan-san rolled his eyes but reached over to take his portion of medicine and sake. He had been telling the truth, though. His injuries had healed, at least as much as they were going to, but his arm still refused to work properly. It was slowly becoming clear that it would probably never work properly again.
石田三役は熱燗で飲むのが粋だよな。羨ましいぞお前ら。
羨ましいなら飲めばいいだろ。新八さんだって怪我人じゃねえか。
酒は飲みてえが、残念なことに俺の怪我はもう治っちまってるんだよな。
Nagakura was injured at the Ikeda Inn, but he recently declared that he was completely healed, despite the fact his wounds still looked painful. This man will fight through anything. I'd heard he had convinced Hijikata-san that his wounds weren't as bad as Okita or Heisuke's.
しかし、宗司と東堂君が怪我をするとはね。
あれは池田屋が暗かったから、普段の戦いなら遅れは取らないって。横合いから急に殴られたんだよ。おかげで八金なんて真っ二つだしさ。
拳で八金を割るか。随分と豪気な奴がいるもんだ。
Heisuke muttered something bitter and angry under his breath, but Harada just laughed.
あとなんだっけ、宗司から逃げ切ったやつもいたしな。
Oh, Okita only smiled quietly as Nagakura gestured towards him. He doesn't like the fact of this, does he? I can see it in his eyes.
次があれば絶対に逃がしませんよ。次に勝つのは僕ですから。
Everyone began sharing their experience at the inn. Saito, however, remained silent. Is there something bothering you? I kept my voice low, so as to not to interrupt any of the other men in their conversations.
宗司らを負傷させるほどの実力者があの夜池田屋にいた理由を考えていた。長州のものではないと言ったそうだが、池田屋も人払いはしていたはずだ。池田屋の人間と老子たちの目を盗み、何らかの目的で侵入したか。目的は違いども行動を共にしていたのか。今確実にわかるのは奴らが相当の実力者だということだけだ。
The sliding door suddenly flew open as Saito finished his sentence and Kondo-san appeared.
会津藩から伝令が届いた。
Oh no. It's the clip of death that's going to come here now, isn't it? Oh no, this very loud sound effect. As all conversation ceased, eyes turned to Kondo-san.
長州の襲撃に備え、我ら新選組も出陣するよう仰せだ。
Here it comes. Here it comes. A cheer went up from everyone present. Wait, did it not?
ついに来たか。待ちかねたぜ。
Never mind, it didn't happen. No, thank God. I was not prepared to have my ears be blown out.
残念だったな、平助。怪我人はさすがに不参加だよな。
でもせっかくの晴れ舞台だし。
He turned to Hijikata-san, clearly hoping that the commander might give him special leave to go.
不参加に決まってんだろ。おとなしく豚書で留守をしてやがれ。
土方さん、鬼、この鬼副長。
なんだ、そりゃ褒めてんのか。つまきにされたくなきゃ黙ってろ。
Heisuke's mouth snapped shut. I didn't think Hijikata-san would actually stab one of his own men, but neither did I think he would go easy on any of them, even if they were injured.
東堂君、怪我人は足手まといらしいですから、素直に豚書で留守をしましょう。
仕方がねえか。分かった。今回は留守番してるよ。
僕も今回は諦めようかな。参加したいけど本調子じゃないし、ちょっと外で涼んでこようかな。
Okuta sighed and got up to leave. I'm assuming I'll be staying here as well? Kondo-san nodded.
ああ、宗司と平助がダダをこねんよう見張っておいてくれ。
He let out a short laugh and several men grinned. Before long, the Shinsengumi had left for the front, leaving only a handful of soldiers in the silent compound. So, what should I be doing when they're out? Oh, right. Kondo-san had asked me to keep an eye on Okita and Heisuke. I think Okita was in the inner courtyard. To be honest, I was a little concerned for him. He was still recovering, and being out in the cold air wasn't doing him any favors in that regard. Still, that left Heisuke and Sanon-san. Maybe they're still in the common room. Heisuke seemed particularly frustrated at being forced to stay behind, and Sanon-san had been even colder and more distant lately. I was worried for Okita, of course, but I felt there was something deeper affecting the other two. Where should I go? To the common room! I heard Heisuke and someone else talking as I walked down the hall. They were in the common room then.
ああ、俺も行きたかったな。別名あるまで豚書で待機とか退屈すぎだって。
深い傷ではありませんが、大事を取るのは当然でしょう。
It sounded as if Sanon-san was actually trying to cheer Heisuke up. How long had it been since I heard Sanon-san say something nice to someone? He was a very kind man once upon a time. I missed that Sanon-san.
そりゃ確かに怪我は怪我だし、豚書の留守も大事なのは分かってるけど。
君は傷さえ癒えれば、すぐに新選組の表舞台へ戻れますよ。それに比べて私には日陰者の道しか残されていないのですから。
それはそのなんていうか。
An awkward silence fell over the room. It would have been rude for me to speak up, having left the inn unharmed on that fateful night. But if I pretended to enter for another matter, it would make it clear that I was eavesdropping. The yawning won't go away. I had no choice then. I had to return to my room. As I turned to do so, Sanon-san's voice stopped me cold.
しかし、あの薬を使えば、私も再び剣を取ることができるかもしれません。
Treatment? What did he mean by that? Medicine? But he was already taking the Ishida powder. Unless he was talking about something else.
何考えてんだよ、三男さん。本気で羅刹になるとか言ってんの。
Heisuke shouted at Sanon-san. What was this conversation about? Something about this conversation seemed familiar. I heard them mention something like it around when I first arrived. We were eating dinner together when we'd received the news of Sana-san's injury.
薬でも何でも使ってもらうしかないですね。三男さんも納得してくれるんじゃないかな。
掃除。めったなこと言うもんじゃねえ。幹部が羅刹になってどうするんだよ。
They'd mentioned the serum then too. Are they talking about that?
あれは結局失敗になったんだろう。だから掃除とはじめくんが殺すことになったし。
Okuta and Saito had to kill them? That night when an experience I would never forget. Read, brain. That night was an experience I would never forget. But what did it have to do with this treatment?
確かにあの薬は未完成ですが、行動さんさえ見つかれば改良の余地はあります。
Father? What did Father have to do with their treatment? This is a great deal of information to take in. My mind was a hurricane of thoughts, suspicions, and fears trickling through the corners of my mind. Even as I struggled to make sense of what I just heard, I knew that I had stumbled onto something dangerous, something I shouldn't know. Blah blah blah. Suddenly, I wanted very much to be gone. Why did I stay and listen? I was such a fool.
申し訳ありませんが、今の話は他言無用でお願いしますね。
His cold, quiet voice filled the empty hall. Maybe the words that came out of Sana-san's mouth were directed strictly to Heisuke. Heisuke responded with a furrowed brow.
いや、気持ちはわかるけどさ。俺は絶対に反対だから。
I helplessly felt like those words were directed towards me. I scurried from the air as I grasped my fast-beating heart. Run! If what Sana-san had suggested really did happen, as silently as I could, I moved down the hall and away from the common room, back to the room I suddenly wished I'd never left.